Hello, everyone. This is Alice, and welcome to Unit 2. Unit 2 is all about numbers. So we're going to start by talking about how to add and subtract integers. Integers means signed numbers. So what that means is positive and negative numbers. And I'm going to give you a couple of rules to be able to do that really easily so that you will always be able to add and subtract them easily. But first, we need to know a couple of things. Multiplying and dividing signed numbers. So when we multiply and divide signed numbers, so positive and negatives, in either case, we have two different kinds of things that happen. We can either have two of the exact same sign, and whenever we have that, then when we multiply or divide these, our answer, the sign, is always a positive. So again, if the signs are the same, either way, our answer, then when we multiply or divide, is always positive. Okay? If our signs are different, so if we have a positive and a negative, or a negative and a positive, in either case, whether we're multiplying or dividing, okay, if our signs are different, so up here our signs are the same. Here our signs are different. And then our answer in either case is negative. Okay? So remember this, because what we're going to learn now is how to add and quote-unquote subtract. And the reason I say quote-unquote is because the way I have you do this is to think about everything as an addition problem. Okay? But it's important to know about multiplying and dividing. You need to know these, and these rules are different than adding and subtracting. Okay? So now we're going to start. And there's one other thing we need to be sure we understand. Operators. Means plus, minus, multiply, and divide. There are only 4 operators, and they're addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. No 2 operators can ever be written next to each other, no matter what you've been taught, without parentheses. So I cannot write something like this. That's unacceptable. It must be written like this. In this case, however, now the parentheses mean multiply. And when I'm adding and subtracting signed numbers, all those parentheses need to go away. I have to have only positives and negatives between everything. So the way to get rid of these parentheses is to just multiply your signs. You can think of this as a -1 here, but don't write it. You need to think of that as an invisible one in math. So a negative times a negative is a positive. We just learned that up here. If you've got 2 signs that are the same, your answer is always positive when multiplying. So then we would rewrite this like this, and now we can apply our rules that I'm going to teach you now. Okay? So here we go with the rules for adding and subtracting. Every time we have just positive and negatives between any numbers that we're working with, I want you from now on to always look at it and think, this is an addition. No matter what the signs are, this is an addition problem whose signs are, and then you need to fill in this blank, and you only have two choices. You can say whose signs are the same, or you can say whose signs are different. If you use any other words, it's going to mess you up, okay? So you can't say whose signs are both positive or whose signs are both negative or whatever. You need to say the same or different to make these rules work, okay? So this is an addition problem whose signs are either the same or whose signs are different. So let's look at our first scenario when the signs are the same. If we have two numbers and their signs are the same, we've got two rules that we need to do. I always work with the numbers first and then the signs second. So the first thing we do is add the numbers. And then the second thing I do is keep the sign. So let's look at that. Okay, so if I have 3 plus 5, I look at this and I say, this is an addition problem whose signs are the same because this 3 is positive even though we don't write it out here, and this 5 is also positive. So our signs are the same. So I follow the rules. The first rule is add the numbers. So I'm going to add the numbers. And then it says keep the sign. Well, in this case, the sign is positive and we don't write positives. So there's our answer. Let's look at it this way. Okay, whoops. I want to make that a 5. Okay, so here again, we look at this. It says this is an addition problem whose signs are, well, they're the same because the sign of this 3 is negative. The sign of this 5 is negative. So this is an addition problem whose signs are the same. Well, the first rule when the signs are the same is we add the numbers. So I'm going to add the numbers. 3 plus 5 is 8. And then the second rule says keep the sign. I keep the sign. And there's our answer. We're done. Okay? Now let's go to our second scenario. This is an addition problem whose signs are different. Once again, we've got two rules. First rule works with numbers. Second rule works with the sign. So the first rule is if the signs are different, subtract the small number from the big number. Okay, and then the second rule is keep the sign of the big number. Okay, let's see how that works. So this is example 1 and example 2. So if I have 5 minus 2. Now this looks like a regular subtraction problem, but from now on we are going to be thinking of this as an addition problem whose signs are, in this case, different. Okay? All right, so this sign in front of the 5 is positive. We don't show it, so it's an invisible positive. And the sign in front of the 2 is negative, so the signs are different. And our first rule says subtract the small number from the big number. Well, the small number is the 2 and the big number is 5. So 5 minus 2 equals 3. And then our second one says keep the sign of the big number, which in this case is positive. And there's our answer. You see how that works? Cool, huh? What if we have 5 plus 2? Okay, this is an addition problem whose signs are different. So again, we subtract the small number from the big number. So 5 minus 2 is 3. And then it says keep the sign of the big number. And there we have our answer. That's it. We're done. That's all you need to do, guys. So what I'm going to do right now is as many examples as I can possibly do in the time I've got left, which is 4 minutes. So let's look at -6 plus -6. Well, the first thing I need to do here is get rid of these parentheses. So a positive times a negative is negative. So I have -6 minus -6. Well, this is an addition problem whose signs are the same. So I add the numbers and keep the sign. Okay, let's do another one. Let's look at this one. This is an addition problem whose signs are different. -3, +7. So I subtract the small number from the big number and keep the sign of the big number. I'm done. Okay, let's look at this one. 6 plus -12. First, I need to get rid of these parentheses. So positive times a negative is a negative. Now I'm ready to use my rules. This is an addition problem whose signs are different. It's a +6 and a -12, so my signs are different. So I subtract the small number from the big number and keep the sign of the big number. Okay? How about this one? Well, first I need to get rid of the parentheses. Negative times a negative is a positive. This is an addition problem whose signs are the same. So I add the numbers, keep the sign. Let's try this one. So first I need to get rid of the parentheses. So I'll write these down, and then positive times a negative is a negative. So now I'm just going to work with these two first. This is an addition problem with whose signs are different because the 6 is positive and the 7 is negative. So I subtract the small number from the big number and keep the sign of the big number, and then bring the -3 down and continue. This is an addition problem whose signs are different, whose signs are the same. So I add the numbers, keep the sign, and there's my answer. Let's see if I can get one more in here. Let's try this one. -3 minus 9 plus 4 minus 20. So first I need to get rid of the parentheses. -9 plus 4. Negative times a negative is a positive. Okay, now I can only work with two numbers at a time. So I look at these first two, -3 minus 9. This is an addition problem whose signs are the same. So I add the numbers, keep the sign. Let's bring the rest down and keep going. Now I can work with these two numbers. This is an addition problem whose signs are different. So I subtract the small number from the big number, keep the sign of the big number, bring this down. Now this is an addition problem whose signs are different. So I subtract the small number from the big number and keep the sign of the big number. And this is my final answer. There you go.